Hi friends, it's psychic medium Josh Simons coming to you today with a video of something that I really believe in, and it's something that has changed my life. My story, if you're not familiar with it, happened a few years back when I took a DNA test. Now, I always tell people about my story. Prior to that DNA test, I was not a spiritual person whatsoever. I wasn't an atheist, but I had no spiritual practice. I had no sort of religion or spirituality growing up before this DNA test and the journey that started with that test. I was just a guy that liked scary movies, and I've always liked, vampires and werewolves and scary stuff ever since I was a little kid. I've always been attracted to that sort of thing. Prior to this DNA test, like I said, was just a guy who liked scary movies. I had a small marketing business. I was an entrepreneur. I had had several different jobs throughout the course of my life, but I wasn't a person of balance. And I think the people in my life could probably tell you that. I was not balanced. I had my own fair share of anxiety, my own fair share of depression, things of that nature. And it affected my life, it affected my family, it affected every aspect of my life. Something that really helped me is when I took this DNA test, and then what I saw in the DNA test led me to researching my ancestry. What that did is that, for lack of a better term, gave me a spiritual awakening. And as hokey as that sounds, it's really what happened. I feel that one of the biggest sins committed against our society is to tell us that matters of spirit or things of spirit are fake or fiction. And I learned through all sorts of different trials and tribulations that is false, that now I can stand in front of hundreds of people and communicate to people's spirits. I give several readings throughout the course of every day of my life. One of the things that really helped me find balance and find a connection was creating an altar. Altars have been used by humans for millennia, and it actually comes from the Latin word for table. Now, these are places where spiritual or religious rites are conducted, and I created an altar for myself where I could connect to spirit every single day. I have taught classes on how to build altars and some of the principles that I have discovered throughout the course of having an altar and sharing with people some of the principles for altars, and I want to bring that to you today in this video. As you're watching this video, you may be somebody who's never had an altar in your life at all, or maybe you've had one for several years. The idea behind this video is to bring forth some principles or ideas to help you create an altar or maybe tweak the one that you have already. Altars can be in your home, in your business. Altars can be small, they can be large, they can be a place where you perform complex rituals, or they could be simply a place where you go and meditate. My altar at my house is one where I go in front of it every single morning to offer gratitude to my ancestors and spirits, as well as to set intention for the day. However you have an altar, whether it's one that you take with you, a portable one, and yes, there are ones like that, or one that you have in your home or your business or your workplace, even if it's a tiny little representation of your spirit at your desk, these altars should be a representation of your inner world. I like to think of them as sort of a spiritual computer, a place where you can sit down, meditate, give offerings, offer up gratitude, have small rituals or large rituals, what have you, but this should be a place where you engage your spirit on a regular basis. I find it very helpful for me to begin every single morning at my altar, and I also find that if I'm traveling and I don't have time to be at that altar, that I can feel it throughout the course of my day. So not only is an altar very important to our everyday lives, but it's something that can help us with not only our mood and our energy. And you will find that just by entering the space of your altar, that will uplift you and balance you. So now we're going to go over the steps on how you create your altar. I always like to keep things very simple. So the very first step we look at is what we'll be using our altar for. There are ancestral altars, there are magical altars, there are altars where you can sit and worship or venerate specific spirits, deities, gods, or goddesses. The very first step you'll want to find out is, what are you going to use your space for? The next place in creating your altar is to find a place to put it. Real basic. I am a big believer that when it comes to matters of spirit, we are our own best authority. So ultimately, I want you to go with what feels best to you. Now, altars should be in a relatively private and quiet spot, so you can have whatever sort of space you need for any meditative or spiritual practices that you have. Traditionally, ancestor altars are facing north like this one is right now, but they can be wherever you want them to be. You can have an altar that's just for you. You can have an altar in your kitchen. You can have one in your bedroom. You can have a family altar in a common space where members of the family go and spend time at it, bring offerings, maybe fresh flowers, something to that effect. Another example for an altar is to perhaps have one for the ocean or a sea deity, an ocean spirit. Traditionally, the direction of west is associated with water, so you could have an ocean altar facing west, or depending on where you're at, you could have an altar facing the direction of the nearest ocean. Where we're at in New England, the closest ocean is to the east, so I would have an ocean altar facing east. Whatever it is, just make sure that it's in a spot that feels really good for you, and ideally, if you could have it near a window where you can get natural light, or perhaps even crack the window so you can have fresh air while you're working in matters of spirit. When it comes to matters of intuition, I like to think of intuition as magnetic polarities. When we were kids playing around with magnets, we would often take the magnets and try to make one end touch, and it wouldn't. It would be forced away. I think we've all done that. And then you could flip the magnet around and it'd be that sense of connection. I like to think of intuition as that. Now, when you're looking to place your altar, a way that you can do it is actually write down the spirit's name, the god or deity's name, the ancestor's name, put it on a piece of paper and take it in your hands like this and walk it around your home or your business or wherever the altar's going, and wait for that feeling of connection, that kind of click in place, if you will, of your intuition. That'll be the first sign that this is a great place to have it. Ultimately, what I would recommend is that you would avoid plastic of any kind on your altar, around your altar, any sort of synthetic materials, and avoid placing your altar in the bathroom, because the bathroom or the restroom is a place associated with waste. So do that, follow your intuition, and remember that you are the best authority for your matters of spirit. The next step is to actually build your altar. Now, tables and shelves and countertops, those are all fine. When I actually built my first altar, what I did is I took a 1 by 12 inch piece of barn board from my property, sawed it to length, put shelf brackets on it, and secured it to the wall where it was chest level. Remember, your altar is a space that should be absolutely private and sacred, meaning no members of your family should really be disturbing it. And that goes for your furry members of your family. My altar was chest high, so my cats couldn't jump on it and disturb it. Now, when it comes to altars, don't create them too large, because you'll want to be able to manage every inch of your altar. You want to be able to reach and touch and clean all parts of your altar. I want you to think of your altar as a spiritual computer where you sit down and engage matters of spirit. When you sit down at your computer, you can essentially touch and manipulate all of the pieces that help it function. The next step in the process of building your altar and creating a sacred spiritual space for yourself is to consecrate the altar, or to make it your own. What you'll want to do is get a bowl of salt water and wipe down the surface before putting any sort of cloth or fabric on it. Now this is an example altar, and I haven't done that because I'm not making this a sacred spiritual space for me. But if I were to be doing that, this would have been wiped down with salt water, and I would have used care, faith, and devotion while doing so. The next step after that, after you've cleansed it, is to sort of charge it. And you can essentially just take your hands, place them on the altar, center yourself and take some deep breaths, and consecrate it with your words, asking that your deities, your helping spirits, your ancestors, honored and well-intentioned, help to create this space of sacred spiritual practice for you. Keep it simple, keep it heartfelt, and there's no way you can fail. Now, we're to the fun part. This is where we decorate our altar and we make it our own. Remember that this is your space, you make it your own. I am a big believer in ancestor veneration and venerating and worshiping the land. I'm a big believer in that because, one, we wouldn't be here without our ancestors, and two, we wouldn't be here without the land itself. So incorporate symbols and photos into your altar space that represent your ideals. Like I said, and I'm a big believer, and it's highly recommended that you include a representation of your ancestors and a representation of how you connect to nature. What you'll want to do is you'll want to also try to have a representation for all of the elements. So let's get started. So what you see here on this altar are pictures of my ancestors. Right here, this is my great-grandmother, Myrtle. This is my grandmother's mother. And this is a representation of my mother's side of the family, the grandmothers. Over here is Jehiel. This is my grandfather's great-grandfather. This is the very first photo of a gentleman from my father's side of the line that was taken. So here I have a representation of both lines of my family. At the very center of the altar, towards the back, I have a representation of the divine. Now you can look at it as the divine feminine, the divine masculine. You can have representations of both. You can have just one representation of spirit. This is Guan Yin, and Guan Yin is a bodhisattva from the Buddhist religion, and she's actually a spirit that I have connected to before, and I honor her. I don't have a personal space for her, but I'd like you to see this statue as a representation of your connection to divinity. And again, remember that we should have a representation of all of the elements. Here we have a piece of driftwood that I found on Lake Champlain in Vermont, and it has some beautiful purpley pink markings on it, but it was just a gorgeous piece of wood. And I'm gonna set it right here. And what this does is this represents what you could call the hedge, right? As we're on this side of the spiritual world and they're on the other, it's always nice to have a representation, a line that you cross as you bring something to your spirits. Now you can see I've added some more items to the altar. Right here, I have a lovely ceramic sculpture of two hands open. And I have it right here because I'm a big believer in making offerings to our spirits. I don't really know how it works. I can just tell you that our spirits do benefit from the offerings that we bring. I actually use maple syrup a lot giving offerings. Tobacco's traditional, flowers are also traditional. But here's a spot where my spirits can accept the gifts that I bring them. Also think, you love receiving gifts. You love it when somebody thinks of you. Think of that relationship that we build when we make offerings, and think of our spiritual helpers and our ancestors, that we're taking time out of our busy lives to bring them something. So again, it's highly recommended, but you don't have to do this, highly recommended to have a place on your altar where you can make offerings and bring offerings. Here is a piece of quartz that came out of the brook behind my grandmother's house. My grandmother loved the brook that ran behind her house, and this connects me to her, connects me to nature. Here are some turkey feathers that we found that connect me to the element of air and to birds. I'm a big believer in having water on the left and fire on the right. Again, representations of two elements. I have a dish here where I'll be lighting incense, bringing my prayers and my reverence to the spirit world in a traditional way. And back here, I have a bouquet of fresh flowers. It's always great to offer up fresh flowers and the fruits of the earth to your ancestors and your spirits. The earth is beautiful. They still love it, even though they might not be here physically to enjoy it. They still have fond memories of it. They still work with it. And again, we wouldn't be here without our ancestors, without our connection to the divine spirit, our creators, as well as the earth itself. And now that you've built your altar, now that you've placed your altar, now that you've decorated your altar, you're going to want to use it. I always like to open up any sort of devotional period with the sound of a bell. And you don't have to do that. You can say a few simple words to open up the space, but you can see now I have a candle going, I have some incense burning. This would be the time to offer up your gratitude to your ancestors, to offer up thanks to your helper spirits and to your benefactors unseen. This is also time to set intention for the day. Something that I like to say every day is that I will walk through this day with courage, nobility, and honor, truth, wisdom, strength, power, compassion, and love. And I ask that all of my helper spirits help me with that, my ancestors, my benefactors unseen, as I call them, to help me accomplish that so that I can create a difference in this world, so that the balance and wholeness within me helps to center and heal others. This is also a good time for divination. As you can see here, I have my tarot deck. I also have a bag of runes. After I give up my thanks and my gratitude to my spirits, I like to pull a rune and I like to pull a card, just asking for a lesson for the day to help me see the energies that I should be on the lookout for and to help me see the energies that I should cultivate throughout the course of my day. If you're lucky enough to know some history about your family, it is a good opportunity to play something that connects you to them here as well. Maybe somebody liked coffee, maybe somebody liked maple syrup like I know that my relatives did. This would be a good place to have a cool cup of fresh spring water to place every day to offer up that freshness from the earth to your ancestors. It's really important to keep your space as clutter-free as possible. You'll find that there will be items that you accumulate in your spiritual practice. There will be jars of incense or packages of incense. There will be extra candles. There will be lighters. I like to think that anything that's on my altar space is something that is directly related to that spiritual practice. So you'll probably want to have a little cubby or a little table or a shelf next to your altar space to kind of hold your supplies. That's really important to think of this as a sacred spot. Again, making it a place where animals can't get to it. Other members of your family can't get to it if this is a private space. Now, you can have altars that are temporary and throughout your home. A kitchen altar where maybe you can build some crystal grids. Kids love stones and crystals. Have a place for them where they can make different designs with them. You could have a little altar in your living room perhaps where you offer up thanks and gratitude to different deities every week. Or maybe you honor your grandmother this week and you honor your grandfather next week. You'll want to make sure that when you're cleaning your altar that you don't clean it with any sort of unnatural or synthetic chemicals. You want to keep it as clean as possible, as natural as possible. You can see here in very short order, I was able to create something very beautiful and something that even in a small amount of time means a lot to me. And I want you to be able to do that for yourself. Remember, no matter what you do, it has to feel good to you. It has to feel right and natural. You are the biggest authority for your matters of spirit. Sure, I can show you what's worked for me and what's traditional, but I want you to have a space that's your own. I like symmetry. I like having balance. I like having things kind of even. You don't necessarily have to have that. Whatever it is, remember this is your space. This is a place that when you enter it or come near it, this is going to help bring you balance, bring you joy. It's a place where you can offer up gratitude and love to all of the spirits that are around you helping you. It's made a great difference in my life, and I know it's made a great difference in the lives of others. If you have any questions, always please let me know. But please have a space where you can connect. This will only change your life for the better. Thank you.